First details on Season 2 and the final event, eerie island changes, the return of Midas, and the inevitable apocalypse heading straight for us. Chapter 7 has undoubtedly pushed the Fortnite storyline to the very top by introducing 2 new members of the Last Reality. We have 3 Zero shards hidden on the island, a mysterious eye connected to the Nothing, the Looper's calendar, Dr. Sloan, and the return of the most beloved character in the Fortnite universe. However, all of this might not matter, because Dark Voyager has already begun conquering other worlds, making these current events the most important in the entire history of Fortnite. Even before Chapter 7 started, on November 27th, Epic Games co-founder Mark Rain gave us one word to describe the new chapter: dodecahedron. This refers to a 12-sided 3D shape. While most people claim this is related to the Las Vegas sphere and its recreation on the Sandy Strip, in my opinion, it is connected to the Last Reality. Since a dodecahedron is one of the 5 platonic solids, and the Last Reality bases their logos and objects on cubes, this theory holds water. It connects perfectly with Classified Canyon, where the triangle layout matches the Last Reality's logo impeccably. At that very location, we can find a board featuring Agent Jones, Voyager's ship, aliens, a massive UFO, and Peely marked with a circle. Remember that detail well, because he is very significant to the Chapter 7 story. The same goes for the Looper's calendar, which appeared on the Humble Hills for unexplained reasons. We first saw it in Chapter 4, Season 4, when Kato Thorne possessed this very intriguing item. We do not know much about it, but it depicts the loop, and the crown placed in the center symbolizes the 0 point. We do not know exactly why this calendar ended up in Chapter 7, but it contains the symbols of all members of the 7 except for the sisters. But what does that mean? We know the Order is on the island in our new reality, and according to the latest info, the Imagined did not actually die. What if the Imagined, just like Gino, reformed herself? It seems Gino might have resurrected her because he loves his daughters, even if he does not know how to show it. The Foundation is in a similar situation. This state of affairs is suggested by a seemingly insignificant loading screen of Valeria from Chapter 5, as its initial version showed a plan to restore the Order and the Foundation. However, Epic Games changed this at the last minute. Returning to the calendar topic, it clearly indicates that Lethal Labs is the work of the Imagined Order. A special role in this puzzle is played by Karina, an island resident, who openly speaks about her investigation into labs. She mentions that their servers contain a ton of censored files and references to the 7 and the 0 reality. It is very sketchy that a huge underground lab is using Last Reality technology. Their knowledge is way too advanced for ordinary people, and the lab is operating secretly even though it looks abandoned. There is a facility in the desert that is not as deserted as they claim. In the classified labs files, there is frequent talk of different realities, and the 7 are constantly mentioned. The 7 and the Last Reality return to Chapter 7 at the start, so the only group missing is the Imagined Order. In her first voice log, the Order said something extremely intriguing about the storm. The problem is that in Chapters 5 and 6, the storm was completely stable. The only people we know who can manipulate the storm are the Imagined Order. Does that not seem a little suspicious to you? Chapter 7 is now the 3rd chapter in a row where the return of Dr. Sloan is teased, so let's hope Epic finally decides to bring her back at some point. Moreover, banners, symbols, and objects with the characteristic cube shape of the Last Reality have appeared everywhere at the former Lethal Lab location. I am starting to believe this symbolizes the Eye of the Nothing that watches everything. As the leaker Blorson reported, the golden cube in Voyager's ship is named Eye in the game files. My theory might be further confirmed by the loading screen of a member of the Nothing, which focuses mainly on eyes. The all-seeing eye is a symbol of an eye surrounded by rays of light or glory, usually enclosed in a triangle. And what does the Chapter 7 island focus on? Mainly on triangles in the form of the bunker in the desert or the storm taking that exact shape. Not to mention that all around Classified Canyon, we can find signs with eyes watching our every step. Let's go back for a moment to Chapter 6, Season 1, because the Battle Pass included a emote called Watch Closely, illustrating a red eye surrounded by rays of light. It clearly alludes to the Classified Canyon location, convincing me that Zone 7 in Fortnite must have belonged to Gino and the Imagined Order for a long time. It is evidently a place where they could fully observe the nothing and understand how to fight against it. Staying on the topic of the canyon, Fortnite now allows us to open a door inside Zone 07. This is called activating the escape vortex, which is filled with glitch effects. When we do this, the great circle of the canyon triangle opens up, and it looks epic, although it gives me slight déjà vu of the moment Jones decided to seal the bridge and stabilize the 0 point using kinetic ore panels. Subsequently, the 0 point transported itself to the Fortnite Island, taking Jonesy with it. This leads us to the conclusion that the next 0 shard must be located in Classified Canyon. The order indicated in early voice logs that initial scans showed a high concentration of 0 point energy on the Gold Coast, and game files confirmed that 2 other shards are located somewhere else. To find out where, let's look at the Dark Discoveries loading screen, where Dark Voyager seems to be tracking 3 objects on the island, likely being the 0 shards in the current reality 266. A lot of information is revealed by another loading screen called Karina's Investigation. Given that she and Hope are pointing at Voyager's ship extracting 2 hidden 0 shards using a grabber placed underneath, if I am right, this would mean one of the shards is hidden in the desert in Classified Canyon. Think about it. A gigantic, abandoned underground complex with tons of locked doors is located in the middle of the desert. It stores artifacts of the last reality and massive amounts of a mysterious substance that causes objects to vanish. It would be the perfect place to lock a 0 shard deep underground. However, regarding the second missing shard, the surest bet seems to be the giant diamond on the sandy strip, creating a neat triangle between the 3 elements. Since we are on the topic of the 0 point, leakers have noticed a new vault design in the game files that looks almost identical to the one from Chapter 1. It is easy to guess that it will replace Lethal Labs at the end of the season, since it shares the same staircase design the developers used near the 0 shard. Consequently, the 0 point will soon be restored and renewed. This vault might also be the work of the Seven and Midas, who are once again trying to lock the 0 point in a safe place after realizing that releasing it means an even bigger catastrophe. The Midas storyline is particularly interesting here because, as you remember, in the last chapter, he planned to move the 0 shard to the vault with Hope, which ultimately failed. And as we remember, Midas is someone who loves to appear every second season of the chapter, so it's no wonder that in the next season, once the 0 point is restored, Midas will come into play again. But let's switch gears to Season 2. With only a few weeks left, it's only natural to ask the big question: what's coming next? Even though we still have 2 updates before the season launches, the community is already focused on 2 things: how this season ends and what the next season is really about. Those questions are impossible to ignore. I've talked before about my theory around the Dark Voyager and where his story could be heading, but now it's time to zoom out and connect the dots. Because if the clues are pointing where I think they are, we're about to crash straight into a reality filled with Norse gods, ancient rituals, and something much bigger than anything we've dealt with lately. Before we can predict the full storyline of Season 2, we need to understand how the current season, Pacific Break, is likely to wrap up. At this point, I'm almost sure we're getting an event. Maybe not a massive end of chapter spectacle, but at least something on the level of a mini-event, similar to the Chapter 5 Season 1 Pandora's Box moment. A quiet ending just wouldn't fit the pace we're seeing. Look at how fast the Dark Voyager plot has moved. In just a short time, he's gone from hovering over the island to focusing on the 0 point shard, opening a rift, disappearing, and reshaping the lab area. That is a lot of major story movement in a tight window. When you compare that tempo to the Cube Queen storyline, it becomes obvious that Fortnite is building the same level of danger in far less time. And when Fortnite accelerates the narrative like this, it usually means one thing: a climax is coming. The story isn't going to just fade out. I think the final event will mirror the structure of the Chapter 5 Season 1 finale, but with a completely different purpose. This time, the Dark Voyager's focus will be the 0 point shards, and I believe his disappearance wasn't random at all. Fortnite has been showing us that he's more than a villain with a spaceship. He's a voyager between realities, and his mission is to gather the 0 point fragments scattered across different worlds and fuse them back together. Leaks have been hinting that the rifts tied to this storyline aren't all the same. The realities inside them have different colors, and there are 4 in total. To me, that feels like intentional foreshadowing. Each color likely represents a different reality, and each reality could set the tone for what comes next. Not just one season, but the roadmap for several seasons ahead. So why would he do any of this? The most likely answer is that he's doing it in the name of the last reality. And honestly, I don't think there's any doubt we'll see the last reality return in this chapter. Skin's survey have already been circulating that show crown wearing characters who visually echo the Cube Queen, but with a totally different design language. One of them looks chaotic and even has chrome-like elements, which feels less like coincidence and more like a warning. New rulers are coming, and they might not be alone. That also explains the Dark Voyager's behavior. He doesn't feel like someone improvising. He feels like someone following a plan, step by step, building toward a moment where multiple forces finally collide. In the event itself, I imagine we launch an assault on the Dark Voyager's ship. The objective would be to push into the core control area and shut the portal down from the inside. And yes, I think we'll succeed, at least on the surface. The portal will be closed, and the Dark Voyager will be forced back. But the celebration won't last, because by the time we shut it down, it'll already be too late. The rift will have done its job. Something from the other side will have made it through, and that's where the story takes a hard left. The guests that arrives won't be another variation of cubes. It'll be something mythic and something aggressive. A force tied to Norse mythology. The gods will seize key locations across the island and start imposing their own order before anyone can stop them. At first, the idea of Fortnite tying this to Norse gods might sound wild, but it becomes a lot more believable when you remember how Fortnite has been blending realities lately. We've already seen objects and threats cross between chapters in ways that prove the boundaries are thinner than they used to be. If the red cube can echo across timelines and appear again later, then an invasion that connects to the Ice King's past and older mythic power is not only possible, it's the kind of twist Fortnite would absolutely lean into. On top of that, the community has been hearing about a Norse-inspired season for a long time. And while leaks are never perfect, some of the same leak waves that mentioned this also correctly called other major story beats. So even if you take it with caution, you can't just dismiss it. The map itself also feels like it's whispering the same message. Certain terrain choices look like callbacks to older chapters, and some details feel placed on purpose. The giant bear tracks are a great example. On their own, they could just be set dressing. But in Norse mythology, bears are symbolic. They represent strength, warrior spirit, and primal power. When you combine those hints with the leak trail and the current storyline direction, it starts to feel less like random decoration and more like setup. Once the gods arrive, that's when Season 2's real story begins. They won't just show up and stand around like background characters. They'll take over, reshape the island's power structure, and prepare for the arrival of something even darker, the Nothing. And unlike past myth-themed seasons where the villains sometimes felt passive, this time the antagonists will move like conquerors. Odin and Thor won't be portrayed as heroic legends. They'll be invaders, working toward a goal that serves a larger and more sinister force. We'll fight back, of course. Jonesy and Hope will be at the center of that resistance, and we'll likely get a major early season battle where we try to stop the gods head-on. And we'll lose. That loss matters. Fortnite stories work best when the heroes get humbled first, because it raises the stakes and forces new alliances. The turning point will come around mid-season, when bigger names enter the picture. I think Kratos returns, and I also think Midas comes back. Fortnite loves its cycles, and Midas showing up during key Season 2 moments has basically become a pattern. If the island is facing god-level enemies, then bringing back characters with mythic connections and strategic influence makes perfect sense. Then comes the move that pushes everything toward the finale. Odin brings the Ice King onto the god's side. Whether it happens through manipulation, promises, or a bargain, it lines up with older leaks, suggesting the Ice King was always meant to be more important than what we've seen so far. As the season nears its end, the truth becomes unavoidable. Odin and Thor are building a portal designed to summon the entity they serve, the being we know as the Nothing. But the story doesn't end with them winning, because the real twist is the Ice King. The heart of the narrative becomes his decision. At some point, he realizes he's being used. He understands that serving the Nothing isn't just another war or another conquest. It's the end of everything, and he refuses to be part of that. During the summoning, right as the portal begins to open, the Ice King takes control. He redirects the portal, forcing Odin and Thor back into their own reality. And with the full force of his power, he seals them away, trapping them in an ice prison that they can't break out of. He saves the island, but it costs him everything. Why would the Ice King do it? To answer that, we have to look at his past and what his story has been building toward this whole time. And this is exactly where the developers are lining up a mind-blowing comeback for a legendary bad guy. According to data found in the game files, the boss with the codename Ice King is tied directly to the structure of Season 2, not the current game files. This explains why Epic intentionally put a hold on his skin and storyline during the OG season, leaving fans scratching their heads. His part is way more massive than just a nostalgic cameo, plain and simple. Plot-wise, this meshes perfectly with the idea that the Ice King is not just a winter character, but a mythical, almost Titan-level figure, which fits the lore of the icy world of Jotunheim and the coming Ragnarok like a glove. Considering many of you only jumped into Fortnite during Chapter 5 or 6, let's take a closer look at this figure. The Ice King is one of the most powerful yet tragic characters in Fortnite history, first showing up in Chapter 1, Season 7 as the ruler of Polar Peak. He arrived on the island inside a giant iceberg that crashed into the map, bringing his castle and an eternal freeze with him. For a long time, the community had him pegged as a straight-up villain who just wanted to destroy all life with cold, especially after he used a shard of Kevin the Cube to summon a massive ice storm that covered the entire map in snow and brought forth an army of ice zombies. The truth, however, turned out to be way more complicated. The king was actually a jailer and a guardian who had spent centuries holding a far more terrifying threat prisoner in his castle dungeons, the Fire King, also known as the Prisoner. All of the Ice King's attempts to freeze the island were desperate measures to stop the ice from melting and keep his enemy locked up, but the plan failed. As the temperature rose, the prisoner escaped, created a volcano, and kicked off a chain of events that changed the island forever, leaving the Ice King in history as the ruler who couldn't hold back the fire. So, the ruler's own story might give us a sneak peek at why he's showing up on the Chapter 7 island, maybe to contain some even more sinister danger heading right for us. Meanwhile, Hope's future visions? Cooked. Either clouded, weakened, or just straight up gone, because the last reality now has control of the spirit realm, where those visions come from. They're basically running it like a VIP Loopers Club. You don't get in unless they allow it. During Chapter 5 and 6, they let Hope see fragments of the future so they could manipulate outcomes, basically using her like a human spoiler leak. But once Phase 1 was done, visions gone, access revoked. End of story. Hope thinks it's either a shard or a bigger darkness behind it, and that bigger darkness basically screams the last reality. At Classified Canyon, there's graffiti showing 3 huge purple triangles on an unfinished map, and it's not subtle at all. That's the kind of message you leave when you want people to notice. Fans are already running with the idea that Hope is now dreaming of the nothing, and honestly, with how heavy the symbols are this chapter, that theory isn't just fan paranoia, it's starting to look like foreshadowing with teeth.